Hey, welcome to my tier list, my Runescape 3 Gods tier list, which is a tier list that I've been meaning to make for a good while, pretty much after the old school Runescape tier list that I made with all of the updates. Now, two things about this tier list. Number one, I didn't include every god because fuck me if I'm gonna include every god, you know. Most of them I just didn't really care that much about, so I was just like, who cares? And secondly, there's no like thing for me to rate this. It's just gonna be my opinion, and I'm just gonna be talking about them. So if you disagree with it, sucks to be you. So yeah, first up we have Armadyl. Now Armadyl is actually a pretty good god, I would say. Not only is he a pretty actually in-depth character, which I actually I always love to have in-depth characters, but also he's a pretty good character overall. I mean, he has a pretty interesting backstory, obviously, you know, sort of his entire species was destroyed, akin to Guthix pretty much, and overall he just always tries to help the player, but always maintaining this relation of, I'm still gonna do what I think is best, as opposed to just supporting the player, which is just great, you know. He seems to have a lot of in-depth. You can talk with him in the tower, at least, you know, after the Wild Guthix or the World Awakes quest. So you can actually talk with him there. And by the way, because I think this is really important to mention, the song that plays at the tower, the Empyrean Citadel song, with Armadyl there, while he talks about, and you can ask him questions about like his past life and stuff like that, it's such a good setting, and it really paints Armadyl as this character that is, you know, has a lot of depthness to him, and it makes it in such a good character, right? The song playing in the background, Armadyl like sort of talking melancholically about his life, his past life and stuff like that, and what he believes and what, you know, why he believes what he believes in. Just absolutely great stuff. There's one downside to Armadyl, which is essentially he kind of plays the same role as Icthlarin does, where he's supposed to like help the player for the most part, right? As the player usually tends to have the same convictions as Armadyl does. So they kind of end up fighting for the spotlight in that sense, but overall, every time that Armadyl appears, every time that Armadyl actually helps you and stuff like that, it's pretty cool. His design is pretty cool, his backstory is pretty cool. I would say that overall Armadyl is, honestly, I would put him S tier, straight up. I think that overall he just has everything going for him. I just think that it's a shame that you didn't actually get to spend more time with him, but especially when it comes to Celiska's endgame, for example, and, you know, how he helps you and everything. I just think that he's very, you know, contrary to a lot of other gods, he's not like very ego-driven and whatnot, and he recognizes, like, you know, the downsides of being a god and having people, you know, swear allegiance to you and everything. So overall, I actually think that he's probably one of the best gods in Gielinor and one of the least annoying. It's always cool when he shows up. Next up, we have a new addition pretty much to the board, Azzanadra. Azzanadra, which was probably amongst one of the most popular Majorat and one of the most prominent ones in the story. He was the one responsible to like sort of bring Zaros back to Gielinor and like establishing that link. So he's the one behind the Temple of Sentistan quest as Dr. Nabanik and whatnot. And he appears as very, you know, peaceful at first and only really caring about bringing Zaros back. Which, sure, I can understand, I get it. For the most part, like, I understand that allegiance to him, although I think that's also his downside. I think for the most part, look, he's smart, he somewhat to a point cares about the player, and he does like sort of play a role within the story of he has allegiance to Zaros, but at the same time, it doesn't really always do what Zaros wants, or like at least, you know, he tries to help the player whenever he can, or, you know, he tries to do what he thinks is right, as long as, you know, Zaros doesn't sort of go against him type thing. So it's a good dichotomy between having allegiance to someone and then doing what you think is right. However, because of how the story tends to be a bit underdeveloped, and especially the end was a bit, you know, more rushed, Azzanadra like lacks a certain depthness. It just seems that everything, you know, it just seems that whenever he's trying to like get a bit of depthness, it just seems to go back to, oh yeah, but I like Zaros, you know, I have my allegiance to Zaros, you know, even as a god, it's like, no, I'm just doing, you know, what Zaros would have wanted, and it sort of reminds me, you know, like fucking middle school crushes, you know, it's like, no, but I love Zaros, you know, like, I'm sure the Zaros will notice me someday, and just like, just fucking drop it, man. Like, I'm sitting here, you know, the world's gonna fucking end, and you're just sitting there as if, you know, Zaros is your first crush or some shit that you just can't let go of. Obviously, with, you know, the ascension to, you know, godhood and everything, sort of that power, that influence that certain gods tend to have over the people around them is sort of waning a bit, but it still maintains it, like, oh no, I'm loyal to Zaros or whatever. I just think that ruins the fucking character, and his design is fucking questionable. It doesn't show up here, but he's amongst the more modern designs, and I think that his colors are a bit too washed for the most part. I just don't really enjoy his design too much, and he has like 3 antennae on the fucking head, which I guess is supposed to be a crown, but yeah, just fucking wow, you know. Overall, yeah, like I think it's not a bad character. He's prominent, you know, like he does, again, propose that interesting dichotomy between doing what you think is right and having blind allegiance to someone. But overall, I think it was a bit underutilized for the most part, and I really would have loved to seen a bit more development out of him, especially after the Brink of Extinction quest, you know, where you defend the monolith. Yeah, kind of overall just a shame, but I think it's still material for A tier. Next up we have Bandos. Now, Bandos is one of those gods that is pretty simple. You know, he likes war, he likes strategy, that's it. His design is also pretty interesting. It's just, you know, it's just kind of your run-of-the-mill, you know, war fighting type god, which is good, you know, sometimes you need more simple gods. Unfortunately, because of his simplicity, he also likes a lot of depth. Like, Bandos is literally just, I like to fight, that's it. You know, and as a result, you don't really care too much about him. Like, even the quests involving Ubisk, right? I cared more about, like, Grathor, for example, you know, which is like a champion, or I cared more about Zanik than I necessarily cared about, or like the goblins or whatever, you know, like essentially his followers, than I cared about him as a god. And yeah, that lack of depthness just really, you know, sort of goes against it, but at the same time, because it doesn't really have a lot of depthness, you know, it's also not a lot of negatives to him, so I would say Z tier, really. Next up we have Beak. Now, Beak is an Elder God, and honestly, Elder God's designs pretty good, aside from the face. I think that their faces are a bit questionable, but aside from their faces, I think that their design is pretty good, and I think that their ideas are also pretty good, you know, essentially Elder Gods that created everything, you know. And I also like how they usually have a secondary thing related to them. So, for example, Beak is Earth, but I think it's also alteration. So they have a, you know, concept and a specific, like, element to them. Jazz is, for example, air and progression, right? So overall, it's just like, it's pretty cool that they have that. Unfortunately, because they're the Elder Gods and because they can't exactly interact too much with the world itself, given their power, I guess, you don't really see them as characters, especially, I don't think you ever speak with Beak once. Like, I think that the only Elder God you speak to is Jazz, and that's pretty much it. For the most part, yeah, obviously there's not a lot of character there, I would say, but I would say that, you know, given their status when it comes to how they interact with the world and like how they see the world and how little they pay attention to the world, because to them, like, Gielinor existing and all of the species in Gielinor and stuff like that, that's just, you know, food for them, essentially, you know. They're gonna hatch their eggs and then they're gonna go to the next cycle, and that's pretty much it. They're like creators and they don't care too much about their creations and what their creations are doing, so they are a bit detached, and they pose that, you know, sort of irreverent element of having someone that's just so powerful and that, you know, I don't really know what to do against them. So yeah, overall, you know, I'm gonna give it the B for Beak, you know. And next up we have Brassica Prime, which I know, kind of a meme. However, the reason is why I included Brassica Prime in this is that despite being sort of a meme god or whatever, Brassica Prime actually did introduce a very interesting concept, I would say, which is the concept of essentially having these anime guardians, because Brassica Prime, despite being a god, it's sort of like a, you know, anime guardian like Vorago or Solak, for example, because Brassica Prime is a sentient cabbage. That's it, like, it's an oversized sentient cabbage. But Vorago is an oversized sentient mountain. Solak is an oversized sentient tree. So for the most part, I think that Brassica sort of introduced that interesting concept and allowed players, because of especially, the funny meme nature of it, to actually, be more open to just a weird idea, which is inanimate object just being kind of, or at least, objects that you wouldn't think too much about, like trees or mountains, to actually have a sort of, strong variant of them, I guess. So for that, I will put it A tier. Next up, we have Fool, another Elder God. Again, B tier, pretty much the same thing as B, although Fool I actually enjoy it more than Bic. I would say, for the simple fact that Fool is very interesting in that Fool she created the Tsar, or not the Tsar, the Tokar, right, which pretty much created the mountains. I actually find that type of concept really cool. Again, like, they're supposed to be creators, they create the worlds, and then, use some of them to go to the next cycle where they transfer their memories and, whatnot. There's an entire, like, god thing. If you don't know about RuneScape 3 lore, which, I mean, time to fucking say it. Spoilers, by the way, in case I haven't said it yet. I'm sorry if you weren't expecting spoilers in this, but yeah, essentially overall, you should go and actually read about the lore and stuff like that, because it's really interesting. I think that RuneScape 3 lore is actually really interesting, so, I actually find that, and honestly, the entire, like, concept of having sort of these creatures that are forged in, like, lava that build mountains, I think it's a pretty fucking cool concept, honestly, and, then you have Zac as a result of Fool and everything. Overall, it's just a nice B tier. Unfortunately, you also don't really interact with Fool outside of, just sort of knowing it exists. Fool does have, at least from what I know, a little bit more on the story, because Fool, for example, was responsible for destroying Orthan, in Anachronia, so I guess Fool is a bit more active in that sense, but yeah, I think that another thing about Elder Gods is this notion of not caring about their own creations, because they are so much bigger than their own creations, so they pose that interesting part to them, I guess. But yeah, next up we have Guthix. Guthix is my favorite god by far, like by far. I think that not only is he a super interesting character, I think his backstory is also really interesting. Having to ascend to godhood after his entire plane being destroyed by 3 different gods, being Saradomin, Tuska, and Skargaroth. Overall, seeing everything, it's kind of the same as Armadyl, where, the Empyrean Citadel got destroyed, and, it watched a bunch of people die, and I outlived the second Esben, I think. So, overall, pretty much similar stories, but Guthix to me comes across as more of a in-depth character, in the sense of, like, essentially Guthix was like, okay, but what if I just created a world without gods? And then he ended up creating a world with gods where he was the god, even though he didn't want to have the influence, right? And sort of have that, I guess, humbleness when it comes to being a god. He kind of still made the mistake, because people just felt attracted to his influence, right? People still worshipped him and everything, and as a result, like, he couldn't exactly stop every other god either, so, like, I think he tried to sort of have a final solution type thing, until he realized that actually, I need to implement the edicts and not have any gods around here, so the influence is minimal, and he sort of, like, learned that after a while, so it's sort of as a god, he understands, like, just how things are, and, being a creature that sort of ascendeth to godhood, contrary to other gods that were just gods from the get-go, or at least really powerful in our beings. I think that Guthix has that sort of perspective to it. I do think that it was a mistake to kill Guthix, like, because I think that Guthix is that type of character where, I'm gonna say, I think that Guthix is a bit of a like, Deus Ex Machina type character, where it's like, he knows everything, he can plan for everything, and like, there's that thing. And honestly, I would have loved him to be alive, even if you could have just taken him out of the picture by having him be busy with other things, and as a result he couldn't, like, protect the addicts or whatever, but you could, like, still guide you and whatnot, and sort of, like, be more of a present character, because I think there's a lot of, like, lore and there's a lot of philosophy when it comes to him. I mean, he's supposed to be the god of balance, right? So it's not like he just eliminates all of the bad things, but rather, he just tries to, and I think that the edicts are exactly that balance, where at first he sort of, tried to eliminate the gods altogether, create a world without gods altogether, and then he realized that gods will always have their influence, but they still should stay out of Gielinor. So I think that's just really interesting. I wish I could or that he could have a bit more presence in the story by being alive, especially because even after he dies, you still have a lot of like cutscenes and stuff like that where you go and talk to him and stuff like that, and there's a lot of moments where you mention him and whatnot. So overall, yeah, but overall, by far my favorite god. I love just reading shit about him and whatnot, and how he created Gielinor and everything, and his ideal of like wanting to create Gielinor without any god's influence, how he came across Renmark, where, everything was in balance, because it's the god of balance, so, and sort of like learning from it. Yeah, honestly, S tier. Although I'm gonna say, I think that his design is a bit questionable at times, I think. I don't vibe too much with his design, honestly. It's not bad, but it's also not like cool or anything like that. But yeah, also, let me just say, and this is my favorite thing about Guthix, the fucking flex that it is to just create an entire world, and then, when you get woken up because gods are fighting, you just essentially exclude all of them from Gielinor, right? You establish the edicts, and then you go back to sleep. So you create Gielinor, you are sleeping, you wake up to just finish a war, you go back to sleep. Just like sleeping. All the time. Just fucking honestly relatable as fuck. Next up we have Icthlarin, which fucking what a name. The son of Elidines and Tumekan, I think. Icthlarin. The problem with the Desert Pantheon, and the problem with every other Pantheon, because you also have the, Garanja Pantheon and whatnot, is that I think the Jagex wanted to have like this huge, really, especially when it came to the War Saga, like after the World Awakes quest, after the, just essentially where the gods were fighting each other and whatnot. I think that Jagex sort of wanted to have way more gods involved into it and wanted to have different pantheons involved into it. Unfortunately, I think that they sort of didn't realize or underestimated how much work that would be, and as a result I didn't include a lot of the Desert Pantheon because it's kind of boring and a lot of it's just not that relevant. I don't even remember some of the gods there and what they do. Like if you ask me, okay, what lore is countries involved in, some lore I'm sure. I think other than be a crocodile, I don't know what countries represents or anything like that, right? So yeah, Icthlarin sort of dodged that bullet because Icthlarin is actually way more present in the rest of the story, especially because he sort of plays the same role as Harald or Death. Yes, that's called Harald, and because they sort of have the same guiding souls to the afterlife, and then with the nomads thing, the nomads enemy type deal, I think he was much more prominent in the story. So as a result, I think that overall he benefited much more than Amaskut, for example, which was supposed to be like is equivalent in terms of being the evil side of Icthlarin, but then it didn't get as much prominent in the story. So overall, yeah, the thing with Icthlarin is that essentially I feel that it's just a budget store Armadyl. Like, I feel that they have the exact same thing, except he's much more willing to help the player because he's not as a strong god, and he's sort of like more of a servant, I guess. But the problem is, because Armadyl exists, and because Armadyl, in my opinion, is a bit more fleshed out, Icthlarin is more of a helper than necessarily a side character that, has their own conviction. Like, sure, yeah, he has his own convictions, but it's more like, as long as I can do my job of guiding souls, I'll help you, and it's just like, that's kind of his own conviction, while Armadyl is like, I don't like war, I prefer peace, but, if I need to go to war, I'll go to war. If I need to protect my own, family, friends, I'll protect them against you, type thing. Like, there's more, like, deftness to it, and Armadyl makes that really clear. Icthlarin doesn't seem to have that as much, and is more of a, smartass, as in, like, he knows a lot of things to, like, help the player and help guide the player, but that's pretty much it. Although, with everything, I still think solid A tier, couldn't really ask for more. Next up, we have Jazz, another Elder God. This one you actually do get to speak to it, spoilers, although you don't actually speak too much with her. I know there's a thing in a quest where if you insult her, she will just kill you, and some hardcore Iron Man actually die like that because it's fucking funny, honestly. Now, Jazz does paint exactly the picture of, because you can talk to her, that the other gods don't care about their own creations. They see any other life other than them kind of insignificant to a point, especially because of how powerful they are. And Jazz represents that. The first encounter with Jazz, when you first see Jazz, it's like, holy shit, it's really fucking impactful, and Jazz design is so fucking good. Honestly, on design alone and on first impressions alone, like the first time you meet Jazz would be S tier, straight up. However, because we need to judge Jazz, with other things and whatnot, and again, characters and everything, I just feel that, again, Jazz, same thing with the other gods, where like, Jazz is sort of the oldest, it's the strongest, and honestly, it's the more well thought out. However, I still think that, and I think that Jazz also demonstrates that, where it's like, the elder gods don't seem to have a lot of depthness to them when it comes to like them being character, because like I feel that the elder gods don't really have a lot of conflict. So like when it comes to knowing that there's other life on Gielinor, for example, right, they sort of just task the player with proving to them that the life is worth it. So as a result, because otherwise they'll just destroy it and continue the cycle, right? Because when you hatch the eggs, the world gets destroyed, yada yada, right? And they just sort of get to the players like, oh yeah, just prove to us that life is worth it and we won't go to the next cycle, or at least we won't do it here. And it's just like, how detached are you type thing of fucking being alive, So it's very, in a way, like they're really powerful, but they're very primitive, I would say, in their own like thing. However, I would say again, like first impressions alone, the first time you encounter Jazz in the game, and coming face to face with Jazz, and like just the design of it, I'm gonna have to put it A tier. She's just way too good. Next up we have Ma. Now Ma is a little bit more interesting when it comes to it. I think that Ma is essentially just responsible. So if you don't know, responsible for Earth and like alteration, I think it is. This is responsible for the mountains and just rock and stuff like that, and it's like it has a theme of, it's not consistency, but it's like of just it's like consistent or whatever. I can't remember too well. Van is basically inversion and ice, I think, and Jazz is the concept of sand/air and progression, right? Ma, on the other hand, is the concept of light and darkness and potential. So that's why she creates life, like the Zaros and Seren were created by Ma, and a lot of the Majorat were also supposedly created by Ma and whatnot, and she sort of has created also the Dragonkin and whatnot, at least from the lore things. Now, the other gods aren't supposed to be creating life like that. They're more supposed to be creating worlds that have some life in them, so they can, go to the next cycle. However, to keep themselves alive. However, Ma sort of created more, advanced life, I guess. And that's what's fascinating to me, because Majorat, Dragonkin, is sort of like Ma that created it. If I recall correctly, I don't know, I did the class a couple of years ago, I don't completely know the lore, but yeah, and I find that interesting. Ma's design is a bit weird-ish, I would say, but I think this is like a good design in a way, right? So I would say that Ma is honestly easy A tier. I would even put it there after Jazz. I do feel that Ma's first encounter, the first encounter you have with Ma, is just a bit less impactful than Jazz, especially because she's stillborn and, like there's a certain circumstance there. But you do feel like that fear of being around her, but then it's just like, you never get to speak to her, you never get to see like her full power and whatnot. And yeah, obviously she has more of a humanoid type figure, maybe, but yeah. Next up we have Saradomin. Oh fuck. Okay, so I don't like Saradomin. Like, let's be fucking honest with ourselves. Saradomin is essentially that person that likes to ride on their high horse and you just find them annoying for it, especially because most of the times they're not even fucking right. Saradomin is supposed to be like, you know, order and justice or whatever, and then it's just like, fuck with, you know, he doesn't actually care, he almost rules like an iron fist, you know, it's like a dictator in a way, and honestly, I don't like Saradomin, I find him kinda shit. He's a self-righteous bastard. I think Saradomin is that character in shows where you try to pass him as like this really cool, powerful character, you know, that then just doesn't work out because fans don't actually give a shit about them because they don't have any depthness. That's essentially Saradomin, to the point where he sort of just became this asshole that no one really likes. I've never seen that many people actually like Saradomin. I will say that there's a sort of bit redeeming arc when he loses his crown, and then he's sort of like, he starts understanding that maybe he's being too harsh to his own daughter and stuff like that, and that he has caused damage, because he's always been like, no, I caused damage, but it was completely justified, you know? So, yeah, kind of a fucking dickhead, honestly, and he kind of does, to a point, care, I guess, about his followers, but honestly, can't fuck with the guy. Honestly, I would put him in F tier. He saves himself from F tier just by a hair, just purely by like the last quest where he's like, okay, maybe I was wrong and I'll try to like make amends and actually, you know, try to listen to my own followers and care for them and put them first, as opposed to putting me first because, oh, I know everything, you know. And by the way, he's one of the responsibles for the destruction of the Nagari home, so fuck him. Next up we have Seren. Now, Seren had everything to be an amazing god, you know, like up there with the likes of fucking Icthlarin, you know, even Armadyl. Seren's kinda trash. Hot take, by the way, but I find her really bad. I find it ironic that kind of like all the other gods are a bit primitive in the sense of like them not caring about the other life. Seren and Zaros are a bit primitive in their own like ways, where Seren is about like family and stuff like that, and Zaros is about like this curiosity about the universe, so they're very primitive in that, and that they let that blind themselves and blind the people around them. Seren started as a pretty decent god, pretty similar to Armadyl, I would say, as, you know, benevolent god, all of that. And then it just fucking went downhill. It went downhill so fucking badly, especially with the start of the garden thing, you know, the Gillenor garden stuff to appease to the other gods or whatever. She started being very, you know, I mean, aside the fact that, again, like, her influence on others was really just blinding them. She also doesn't really fucking, you know, like, do many good things, I would say. Because like Seren is very goddess, is like very benevolent but very blinded by her own beliefs, and as a result she's like, the more you peel back the more annoying she is, especially with the plot twist of like, spoilers I guess, but but especially with the plot twist of her like fucking wanting the other gods to actually fucking hatch because she like, you know, sees that she like owes them her life type thing in their existence. So she's like very, you know, protective of them. It's just, why the fuck, honestly? I got by the end of the story and I was just like, bro, I cannot fucking deal with Seren anymore. Just shut the fuck up, honestly. Seren has always had the problem of, you know, being blinded by her own, like, fucking care, quote unquote, you know, the same way that, like, she essentially tied the elves to herself, so if they are far away from her, they just, you know, live in pain and shit like that. Just fucking, you know, like, bro, you made a mistake, just deal with, at least Saradomin and the fucking balls to be like, you know what, fucking, maybe I was, it took fucking years, but maybe I was wrong. Seren never fucking did that. As a result, insta F tier. I would say that their design is kind of good, but like, doesn't fucking save you from F tier. Tuska is essentially a monster that sort of killed gods because, well, it's a monster just sort of killed stuff. Pretty much same as Bandos, you know, yeah. V is pretty much the other god when it comes to the design of the demigods, or like the, you know, more original gods, I guess, as he's supposed to be like the effeminate god. He was the first one to like sort of find the Stone of Jazz and as a result create runes and stuff like that, and sort of teach people rune crafting, I guess. Overall, I really enjoyed that. Actually, Jagex did give him like a couple of a quest at least, and yeah, unfortunately, just insta fucking dies the moment he comes back because of the Dragonkin. A bit fucking anticlimactic, I would say, but hey, it is what it is. Here's a bit there. Then, I mean, pretty much the same as the other gods, the other elder gods rather, she's pretty much the same. This end is supposed to be Xau-Tak, as we never really see Xau-Tak. Xau-Tak is essentially the god of the Eastern Lands. At some point I thought that Xau-Tak was supposed to be the 6th elder god, because there's supposed to be 6, but we only know of 5, and I thought that Xau-Tak was the 6th one that dealt with Shadow Anima, because it doesn't make sense that Shadow Anima exists without a 6th elder god, but, you know, apparently it's not Xau-Tak, but Xau-Tak was the responsible to make, or at least the same thing, it's said to at least, you know, Xau-Tak was responsible to make Ma stillborn by corrupting their eggs with Shadow Anima, so, yeah, but overall Xau-Tak, god that never really showcases or like appears. I find like his entire thing of especially being the god of the Eastern Lands, and sort of creating this notion of like dead oceans and stuff like that, I find that pretty cool. I wish that we actually knew more about Xau-Tak and, you know, more where it came from and stuff like that. I guess that's gonna be revealed, you know, with Erebus and like or stint into it. For now, I think that Xau-Tak honestly takes a good beat here, right there. I also do like a lot of the stuff related to it, like the ambassador, for example, and, you know, the elite tensions, you know, the curses and stuff like that. Pretty cool stuff. Next up we have Zamorak. Zamorak is, I think that Zamorak is, unfortunately, the same way that Jagex was trying to pass Saradomin as like this good god that everyone should be behind. Zamorak is like the inverse. Zamorak is like the god that Jagex found for Saradomin to sort of fight against and win against, to like, you know, pass it on as a bad god type thing. Overall, just he kind of got the short end of the stick, if you know what I mean. Overall, I actually do enjoy Zamorak. I don't enjoy his design, but I do enjoy this philosophy of like chaos, and I mean, he's essentially sort of a simple god in his philosophy, like Bandos, in the sense of like, oh, it's just, you know, I only care about chaos or whatever, but at the same time, because he was supposed to be the rival of Saradomin, he got way more screen time, which means that he got to develop way more, and as a result, he got to know him better, especially when it came to his philosophies, and especially when it came to just knowing him, and, you know, knowing, like, for example, that he stands for equality and that he cares about his own ranks and stuff like that. You know, yes, fucking Zamorak stands for equality. He doesn't actually care about which people join, he only cares that they follow the philosophy of chaos. It's the most hilarious fucking thing ever, and I know that Zamorak at some point was like a bit of a punching bag, but overall, I would say that I actually enjoy him as a god. I think that Jagex did it a much better job than they did with Saradomin anyway. However, I would say that I'm still not a huge fan of Zamorak. I don't like Zamorak too much, but I do appreciate like the role that he plays in the story and everything, and end up being a much bigger character and everything than everyone else. So it's gonna 8 here. And finally, we're down to one, Zaros, and oh boy, people are not gonna like this, because this is gonna be the hottest take that I ever had when it comes to this entire tier list. Zaros is an F tier. Look, let me just be really fucking clear about this, right? I think that Zaros is honestly really fucking bad. Like, it's just bad. It's just fucking bad. I don't know why, but like both, you know, like gods that were descendant of Ma have this problem where it's like they start out as being really cool and whatnot, and Zaros, you know, starts out being like this cool guy of, oh no, I'm like super cool and whatnot, and, you know, actually in reality I just want you to know the truth. You can support me or not, you can pledge allegiance to me or not, I just want you to know what happened and whatnot, and the truth behind Ma and stuff like that. But then he just like, especially after Saliska's endgame, he just goes full-on fucking entitled brat, straight up, like, oh no, but I want to be an elder god because I'm entitled to be an elder god, oh boo-hoo, I was denied to be an elder god, and holy fuck, bro, really? Fucking really? You're serious about that? Like, holy shit, you know? And then it makes matters worse, obviously, as Azzanadra like fucking defends him, and he's just like, honestly, Zaros is like that rich kid that, you know, pays for advantages in games, you know, and then when they're completely fucking beaten and outplayed, they just cry that unfortunately they can't buy any more power so they can win more easily, and it's just like, please man, like just take a fucking seat. I honestly find it unfortunate that chances are, because of Erebus and everything, that we will find Zaros again, but I really fucking wish I just forgot about him and never brought him back. Oh my fucking lord, it's mega fucking annoying to have this guy just be one of the main protagonists and all the fucking time. Again, like, after Saliska's endgame, it just turns into entitled fucking brat. It's just like, no, I want to be an Elder God, I'm gonna do everything to be an Elder God, fuck everyone else, I don't give a fuck about anyone else. Oh, me being like this cool person that only cares about the truth and curiosity. Nope, it's like the curiosity that he had, you know, of like, oh no, I'm a god that cares about, nope, he's completely blinded by wanting to be an Elder God, and it's the most annoying fucking thing ever. Let me tell you something, Salisk gets on my nerves. Like, it's a character that gets on my nerves. I love to hate Saliska, by the way. Like, I'm not saying that it's necessarily negative. I love that Saliska gets on my nerves. It's a type of character that you love to hate. It's a type of character that, you know, makes you want to fight him, and then when you eventually do and beat him, you're like, yes, you know, fucking, you know, like it took down a... So, in terms of immersion, right, Saliska gets on my nerves in a very good way. Saliska made me super fucking engaged with the story. Right, because it got on my fucking nerves. And even when I was, like, Saliska was the type of character that I was literally space-powering through quests, and then when he was on screen, I would actually just read what the fuck was going on, because it was that good of a character. Right? Zaros gets on my nerves. Completely opposite to Saliska. While Saliska gets on my nerves on a positive way, Zaros fucking doesn't. Zaros gets on my nerves on a very fucking negative way. It's like, while with Saliska it's just a character that I love to hate, Zaros is a character that I hate to hate. Like, I wish I wouldn't even pay attention to this guy, but unfortunately plays such a major fucking role that I can't do anything. And then you have another prominent character that has a lot of screen time, like fucking Azzanadra, that just, again, you know, fucking, oh no, my crush is Zaros, and I need to serve that, and oh my, like... Holy shit, I hate Zaros. Like, Zaros is by far the worst fucking character that the game has to offer, honestly. You know, if not the worst, amongst the fucking worst. He's really fucking bad. He lies to people just because he wants to be an Elder God. He's not a fucking cool guy. And honestly, you could say, oh, but his design is actually pretty decent. Is it? Did you know that this is not a mask? Did you know that his lips are fucking there in his shin? His fucking lips are in his shin. F tier. And that was my list, pretty much. If you want to do your own, because I feel that some people are never going to really agree with this, link in the description for you to make your own play or tier list. I'm going to share it, and yeah, if you want me to do any more tier lists in the future, I probably will. I find this quite fun, especially when it comes to hating on Zaros, any day of the week. Any day of the week.